Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in October. I have 10 books to talk to you about today, so I'm just going to get straight into it. Seeing as we are in non-fiction November, I will start with the non-fiction. I read How Do We Know We're Doing It Right by Pandora Sykes. Now, I followed Pandora Sykes' podcast, The High Low, for basically the duration of the whole thing. It was really like a consistent part of my week when The High Low was on. Like, I was always really looking forward to the new episode of it. I really liked it. So I was really intrigued to read Pandora's essay collection that is on lots of different topics that are mainly centered around a kind of millennial woman skewed towards a like middle class perspective on things. And Pandora does acknowledge in the book that some of the things that she's talking about may not seem like the most important things in the world, and they aren't, but they are things that are concerns to a huge demographic of people. She's looking at topics like motherhood, like fashion, like our relationships with social media, with sort of consumption fatigue, in the sense of like there's just so many books you need to read, there's so many TV shows, so many movies that you need to watch, and how that consumption of entertainment has almost turned into a chore because you need to get through like these TV shows at a particular pace so you can be part of the like zeitgeist conversation around them. She talks a lot about fast fashion and our relationship to consumption in that regard. And what a lot of these things come down to is our attempts to make our lives easier, in fact making our lives much harder. I think the tricky thing I have with this book is that there's not necessarily anything that I disliked about it, but there's nothing I felt a strong positive reaction to. I didn't necessarily disagree with anything that Pandora is saying in this book, but equally I didn't think it was a particularly interesting contribution to any of these conversations. Like when she's talking about fast fashion, it's like, yeah, we know and we've known this for a while. It felt like all of her observations, while that she did back them up with research from other works, from other books, other studies, it did feel very surface level, and it felt like information that I had before. I don't think the book promised me anything more than it was. It's just a collection of Pandora's thoughts on modern life. That's exactly what this book is. I'm just not sure for me personally how fruitful I heard listening to those thoughts to be. Is that a bit savage? Like, this book was fine. There was nothing bad about it. I just don't know if I got anything from it. I also read How to Have Feminist Sex, a fairly graphic guide by Flo Perry. This is an awesome illustrated graphic non-fiction book that is exactly what it says in the tin. It is all about how to have feminist sex. It is really inclusive of different experiences of sex. Not all of it is P&V, penetration. Not all of it is heterosexual. Not all of it is able-bodied. There are lots of different body types included in the illustrations from this book that I thought were fantastic. So many things are touched on in this book. It's really thorough, I think, in terms of exploring things like masturbation, about relationships, about sexting, about sending nudes, about orgasms, about monogamy. Like, it goes into so much. The thing I thought going into this book was I thought it would be just kind of like a fun read that was all stuff that I had already thought before and already agreed with, but I actually found a lot of the stuff in this really validating and fantastic reminders from my own life. I think this is something I am going to reread over and over again. It was thoroughly entertaining, but it was also really enriching, full of wisdom, and a reading experience that I got so much out of, and I think many other people would as well. I would highly recommend this. Quite a shift in tone. I read You Are a Champion by Marcus Rashford and Carl Anka. This is a children's non-fiction that is all about empowering children to dream big, to build their confidence, to think like a champion, to behave like a champion, to overcome adversity, and to never stop learning as well. And that lesson to never stop learning was something that Marcus continuously comes back to in the book that I thought was really powerful and really important. He uses lots of examples from his own life, from his career as a footballer, but also experiences from his family and his upbringing, to share stories with children about how he has overcome adversity, how he has been learning all of the time. and how children can take those lessons and apply them to whatever it is they are trying to navigate at the moment. What I thought was really fantastic as well was that at the end of every chapter there are some action points, so it's really encouraging children to actively participate in their engagement with this book, to proactively take on board what they are learning and put it into practice in their own lives. I thought that was done really fantastically, and I think the illustrations do a fantastic job in this book as well of making it really, really engaging for childhood readers and myself as well. While it is important to instill these messages in children from a young age, I think we can all do with reminders sometimes about believing in yourself and being able to use your voice productively. So I would really recommend this one, especially for the younger readers in your life, and I am going to be passing this on to a younger reader in my life as well, so they can get the perks from it too. While we're on books for younger readers, let's stick in that area. I read What Magic Is This by Holly Bourne. I have read several of Holly Bourne's books over the years, and this is the latest one that I took off my TBR. I read this in one sitting and it was so much fun, such a cozy reading experience. It is about the friendship between three girls, Sophia, Mia and Alexis, who are really holding on to the hope that magic exists. They feel like they have these kind of witchy powers, that they can manifest things. They have the power to do these life-changing spells. And the three friends gather together around heartbroken Sophia to put their theory to the test. And as they do this, the truth of their friendship and situations surrounding their friendship start to emerge. The surface level of the plot is really focused on a goal of this relationship that Sophia wants to rekindle, but really at the core of the story is the friendship between these three girls. That is the thing that is hugely important at the climax of this book. I really loved the friendship between these three girls. I really loved the chemistry between them. If you've read some of Holly Bourne's books for teens before, I think this skews a little bit younger than those, but I would really recommend it. As I said, I had such a cozy, wonderful reading experience with this and read it in just one sitting. In October, I also read Wilder Girls by Rory Power, which I thought would be a suitably spooky read for the Halloween season, but I didn't really get this book, and I think it was a me problem, not a problem with the book. There was something that I just wasn't getting into with this. I felt like everything in this book was coming like really thick and really fast. Like there was loads of stuff happening and I wasn't quite giving it enough like bandwidth, like I wasn't giving it enough brain energy that I was able to like keep up with everything that was going on. And I think there's something about the characters where you never fully get to grips with them, and I'm such a like character focused reader. Like I don't really care what the plot is, like it's all about character for me. And when there was like so much plot happening and none of the characters felt quite like tangible for me, and I was struggling to keep up with which of the girls were who, I really struggled. And because of the nature of the world in this book, everything about it feels quite unsettled. It doesn't feel like you can really grasp it. And again, that's something that I think contributed to me struggling with it. I haven't even said what this book's about. This is about an all-girls school that is under quarantine because of this mysterious disease, the tox, that started killing the teachers and then started to infect the students, and it has started to create these sort of mutations in the girls, and they are confined by this gate that they can't go beyond. And then one day when one of the girls goes missing, another one of the girls decides to venture off and try and find her. There is female friendship at the core of this. There are female romantic relationships in this as well. There are so many things about this book, and I think like just the whole aesthetic of the package is something that feels so up my street. I read Rory Power's second book, Burn Our Bodies Down, and I really enjoyed that one, but there was just something about this book that I couldn't get to grips with, and I think I need to give it another shot for me to fully appreciate it, because I do just wonder if I was the problem and not the book. I also read another YA fiction book, and that was Kick the Moon by Mohammed Khan. I had previously read I Am Thunder by Mohammed Khan, and it was on my list of favourite children's and YA books for last year. I didn't love this one as much as I Am Thunder, and it hasn't stayed with me in the same way that that book has, but it was a really fantastic read nonetheless that really looked at some very hard-hitting topics for teenagers and doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of these topics. This book is mainly focused on the relationship between Ilias and Kelly, who are both teenagers in the same school. He feels a lot of pressure from the people around him, both his friendship groups in school, who he doesn't feel like he really fits in with. He doesn't feel like his morals align with those guys, but also pressures from his family as well. Kelly is someone who is also sick of trying to pretend to be someone she isn't to fit in, and in each other they find a real kindred spirit, particularly when they're talking about stories storytelling. You know, he is a comic book artist, she is someone that writes fantasy stories. They have a real connection because of that. And there is a romantic element to that connection, but ultimately it is just a fantastic friendship at the core of that. As I said about our main character's friendship group, he doesn't really feel like his morals align with those guys. There is a lot of sexism, a huge amount of toxic masculinity. The way these guys speak about and speak to and behave around and treat girls is just simply not okay. And when Kelly becomes part of that, it becomes even more complicated for our main character and him trying to figure out what kind of person he's gonna be. Is he going to be the type of person that just lets this sexist, misogynistic behavior, this really dangerous behavior, is he going to let that slide, or is he going to be the type of person to stand up to that? I thought this book was a fantastic exploration of those elements of toxic masculinity that take root when boys are teenagers, and explores how they can become even more dangerous if they are not stood up to. This next book, I like... How do I even... This is Skandar and the Unicorn Thief by A.O. Stedman. Full disclosure, I work for the publisher of this book, but that is in no way impacting the incredibly positive review I'm about to give it. I cannot. This book, like, God, it's so good. I cannot. What are words? Okay, so this is a fantasy middle grade book that is about our main character, Skandar, who has always wanted to be a unicorn rider. But unicorns, in this world, they're not the fluffy, little glittery My Little Pony things. Like, these unicorns mean business. They are powerful. They are dangerous. And yeah, Skandar has always wanted to become a unicorn rider, but he becomes one in slightly unusual, mysterious, kind of suspicious circumstances. And as the story progresses, we learn more about how that's happened. The mystery starts to unravel itself, starts to unfold for us in just the most superbly controlled way. Like, the way the author has paced the story so that we gradually find out little bits of information that help everything piece together. It's just masterful. There is so much depth to this world. I cannot wait to read the future books in this series. I think there's just so much more depth. Like, while a lot of the mysteries were resolved, it's actually in many ways left me with lots more questions, lots more characters that I want to learn more about, lots more backgrounds that I want to learn more about. And you can just tell that the author, like, knows this world, like, inside out. One of the things that is really fun about this book is the elements. So when you become a unicorn rider, you are allied with a particular element, so earth, wind, air, fire. But there is an additional secret element called spirit, which has been kept under wraps because it is often associated with a very dark kind of power, a kind of power that has been used for evil. And I'll leave you to guess which element our main character becomes allied to. I mean, it wouldn't be a secret if it wasn't important. I think if you are looking for a really fun middle grade series that is full of magic and depth and mysteries to uncover, and you don't want to recommend to a younger reader a series by She Who Must Not Be Named, then I would really urge you towards this series instead. It comes out on the 28th of April. I'm so excited for more people to read it because it's just so good. Okay, so now on to the books for grown-ups. I have only one book of literary fiction to talk to you about, and that is The Listeners by Jordan Tannehill. This book follows Claire, who wakes up one night able to hear this really annoying humming noise. It's something that she can't get away from. She can't figure out what it is. None of her family can hear it, and it is really impacting her mental state and, like, stopping her from sleeping. All of those things is really having a negative effect on her life, and she feels entirely alone in it until during a conversation with one of her students, Kyle, she discovers that he can also hear this hum, and he's been going through the exact same experience that she has. No one else has been able to hear it so far. He hasn't been able to figure out what it is. It's hugely negatively affecting his life, and because of this kinship they found in each other, because they had this shared experience, the relationship between the two of them begins to look very suspicious. It begins to look very inappropriate, and that has hugely negative effects on both of their lives. Eventually they begin to find more people in their wider community who are also able to hear this hum, and I thought because of that this book was kind of going to go down this dystopian sci-fi kind of angle, but it's not really about that. It's more about this group of people coming together because of this shared experience, something that has drawn them together when in normal circumstances they would never interact with one another. It's a book that explores religious beliefs and politics and social behaviors. It's a book about conspiracy theories. It's a book about how extreme differences in belief and perception of the world can tear families apart with devastating and often violent consequences. I think this is a really accomplished book, but a lot of it felt quite on the nose, and I was like, okay, yeah, I get the point that you're making about political beliefs being divisive. Yeah, like I get it. I did also find our main character pretty insufferable, which, you know, I don't think helped. I don't think I disliked this book. I think it was just, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the kind of book I expected it to be. I don't think I necessarily wanted to read about political division, and that's a lot what this book was about. I know there will be some people who will absolutely love this book. Like, if using this kind of sci-fi idea to explore those kind of social political things is something that you do think will be appealing, I think you could potentially love this. It's just not really what I was looking for with my reading. Finally, I have 2 poetry books to talk to you about. The first of those is this little black classic. This is Remember Body by C.P. Cavafy. I hadn't read anything from this Greek poet before. I believe he was writing in the late 19th century, early 20th century. His poems have a lot to do with his romantic and sexual relationships. He was a gay man, and I loved the sensuality of these poems. I thought there was something like really sexy about a lot of the poems. There was a lot about the psychology of romantic and sexual relationships, and there was a beautiful nostalgia in a lot of this work as well. I hadn't read anything from this poet before, but I read this in one sitting and I was really delighted to discover his work. And finally, I read All the Names Given by Raymond Antrobus. I thought this was a really interesting collection that has a lot to do with identity and conflicting identities and ancestry. The opening poems in this collection have a lot to do with the poet's surname and essentially how this surname shouldn't have really survived into modernity, but it has. He examines the history connected to this name, but also his own personal history, his childhood and his upbringing, one that was often torn between 2 kind of spaces. One torn between intimacy and brutality, one where he feels torn in terms of his racial and cultural identities. And the collection also explores elements of colonialism, which the poet recognizes are inextricably linked between his own personal identity and upbringing, but a wider global perspective on that as well. And something I love in poetry is that blend of the intimate and the global. I'm always really impressed when a poet is able to do that. I thought this was a really accomplished collection, and I would be really excited to read more from this poet as well. That's it. They are all of the books that I read in October. My TBR now stands at this number. All of the books I've mentioned will be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them. If you've read any of these books and want to share your thoughts on them, do leave me a comment down below, or if there's anything you want to talk about, leave me a comment down below. Also, if you want to connect with me elsewhere, my social media is always linked in the description as well. If you don't have anything in particular you would like to say, leave me your favorite orange emoji so I know that you're here. I think I'm gradually getting my reading mojo back. I think I'm gradually settling back into a reading routine. I do have some annual leave coming up, so hopefully that will bolster my reading even more. I think I'm going to put in a lot of time to really enjoy my reading on that week off. Anyways, that's it for me today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.